Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. Sunlight poured in through the kitchen window, creating a streak of light on the brand new tile. It's a crisp spring morning in a Boston suburb, and the air smells of coffee and fresh-cut wood. Brian was kneeling under the sink cabinet, his toolbox spread out at his side, busy installing the last piece of kitchen flooring. After 12 years of marriage, they were finally able to transform the old colonial-style house into their dream home. Brian is a project manager for a construction company and deals with construction projects of all sizes on a daily basis. But his pride is in completing the renovation of his own home with his own hands. His fingers gently measured the last piece of flooring to be cut, concentration on his face. He heard the front door open, followed by the sound of two women talking and laughing. That's Olivia, his wife, and her sister Amelia. Olivia works as an associate manager in the marketing department of a leading tech company, while Amelia is an analyst at an investment bank in New York. The sisters are close, and every month Amelia drives over to visit them. I have to finish this today, Brian thought to himself, and tomorrow we can start using the new kitchen. He continued to focus on his work, even though sweat had soaked his t-shirt. The footsteps were getting closer, and he heard Olivia walking around the kitchen. Then the sound of glasses clinking. She was pouring water for her sister. At this angle, there was no way she could have seen him working under the sink cabinet. "This place looks great," Amelia's voice rang out. "Where's Brian?" "Probably went to get materials," Olivia replied casually. "He said he was going to finish installing the flooring today." "So?" Amelia's voice suddenly lowered to a conspiratorial tone. "Did you tell him you're moving out next month?" Brian's hand stopped in midair. His heartbeat seemed to freeze for a moment as well. The silence lasted a few seconds, then Olivia's sigh. "No way. I need to secure my promotion first, then take half the account." Brian felt a wave of vertigo, and the tape measure in his hand slid to the floor, but he instinctively caught it to prevent it from making a sound. "Wise move," Amelia agreed. "So your schedule is?" "I have my final round of interviews next week. They've hinted that the position is basically mine. Marketing director. Amelia, imagine that. I've been waiting for this moment for 5 years." Brian could hear excitement in her voice, the kind of excitement he once thought was due to their shared future. "So how are things going with you and Lucas?" Amelia asked. "Lucas?" Brian felt a wave of nausea well up in his throat. Lucas is Olivia's CTO, and they've met at several company events. A talented young man perpetually in a tailored suit, for years younger than Brian. "We've been careful," Olivia said, lowering her voice. "After all, he's an executive and I'm not yet. That won't be a problem when I get my promotion. He said he'd put me in touch with a good divorce lawyer." "What about Brian? How will he react?" Brian heard Olivia give a soft laugh that stung his heart. "You know Brian, he's always so predictable. He'll be sad, he'll be angry, he'll probably beg me to come back. But eventually he'll come to terms with reality. We don't have anything in common anymore, Amelia. He's content with the status quo, and I want more. Lucas can give you more. He understands my ambition. I feel seen and understood when we are together." Not just Brian's wife. Brian's breathing became labored, and he felt a stabbing pain in his chest. 12 years of marriage. 12 years of living together, dreams and plans. And now it was all going to be thrown away, as if the promise between them had never existed. "I was thinking that maybe I could tell Brian after I get my promotion notice. I've got my eye on an apartment that's close to the office. Splitting assets can be complicated, but with half the account, I can start over." "Are you sure Lucas is serious?" Amelia's voice held a hint of skepticism. There are plenty of examples of men saying one thing and doing another when it comes to such things. "Of course I'm sure. Even if he wasn't, it wouldn't change anything. It's over between Brian and I. He just doesn't know it yet." The two women's laughter pierced Brian's ears like pins and needles. He gritted his teeth and forced himself to remain calm. The tool in his hand was almost crushed. Their conversation turns to other topics: Amelia's job, a planned vacation, and memories of their childhood. As for Brian, he quietly continued to finish installing the floor, each hammer seeming to strike his heart. He finished his work calmly, then quietly left through the back door and drove to a nearby park. Sitting in the car, he finally let his emotions erupt. Anger, betrayal, humiliation, all these emotions come in like a tsunami. 12 years of marriage, and she had already planned her exit and had even found her next man. Half the account, he muttered, his fingers unconsciously tapping the steering wheel. Left after the promotion. By the time he drove home, Brian had calmed down. He decided against an immediate showdown. If Olivia can keep a secret, so can he. But unlike her, he wasn't going to be a victim in this betrayal. The next few days seemed like Brian was living a nightmare. Every smile, every family dinner, every goodnight kiss turned into a well-choreographed performance. Olivia doesn't seem to notice anything out of the ordinary, and she remains busy at work, coming home in the evenings to share anecdotes from the office, but never mentioning Lucas or her promotion plan. On Wednesday night, Brian sat in his study, the computer screen in front of him displaying their Union bank account. 12 years of savings, the work of two people. They have always dreamed of using the money to pay for their future children's college education or to travel the world in retirement. And now those dreams are in tatters. He opened a new browser window and began searching for information about Massachusetts divorce laws. As a community property state, the law provides that property acquired during a marriage is usually divided equally. Olivia's plan is legally sound. She is indeed entitled to half of the joint assets. But only if we do get to that point of divorce, Brian said softly. He closed the browser, took out his cell phone, and dialed a number. Morgan, he said when the call came through. I need your help. Morgan is Brian's best friend from college and is now a private investigator. They've stayed in touch over the years, although they've seen less of each other in recent years, mainly because Olivia doesn't like Morgan's rough personality, as she puts it. The next day, Brian meets Morgan at lunchtime at a downtown cafe. So she's going to take half the money and leave you? Morgan frowned, his large hands clenching his coffee cup, his brown eyes filled with sympathy and anger. Yes, but she doesn't know that I already do, Brian replied, his voice disturbingly calm. I need to know more about her and that Lucas. You want proof? I want facts, Brian corrected. I need to know how long this has been going on and how serious it is. Morgan nodded, understanding his friend's feelings. I can track them down for you and get some photos and info. But what are you going to do? Direct confrontation. Brian shook his head, a coldness shining in his eyes that Morgan had never seen before. No, I have a better plan. But first, I need to know what I'm up against. Over the next week, Brian continues to play the role of the clueless husband while Morgan begins his investigation. On Friday night, when Olivia claimed to need to attend an urgent work meeting, Brian simply nodded in understanding and wished her luck. An hour later, he received a photo from Morgan. Olivia and Lucas were talking intimately in the corner of an upscale restaurant, their hands interlocked under the table. Looks like that work session went well, Brian sneered at his cell phone screen. He continued to scroll through the other photos and messages Morgan had sent, dating history from the past 6 months, hotel check-in information, and even some photos of them shopping together. The scope of the betrayal goes far beyond Brian's imagination. This was not just a moment of passion or impulse, but a calculated betrayal, a long double life. When Olivia came home at midnight, she looked a little flustered and guilty. The meeting was longer than expected, she explains, and we had to reevaluate our entire marketing strategy. Brian just smiled and nodded. I understand, honey. That's the way it works. By the way, how did your interview go? Olivia's eyes lit up. I think it went well. We'll have the results next week. She walked over to Brian and gave him a hug. Thank you for your continued support. Brian responded to the hug with anger burning in his heart. He thought back to their first date, to the happiness of their honeymoon in Paris, to all those moments he thought were real. And now it's all turned into an elaborate lie. I'm proud of you, he said softly, hiding the storm inside. You deserve all the success. On Sunday afternoon, while Olivia went to her yoga class, Brian sat at the kitchen table with several papers spread out in front of him. Morgan has provided all the information he needs. Now it's time to make a plan. First, he logged into their joint investment account. As the family's primary financial manager, Brian has been responsible for their investment portfolio. Olivia pays little attention to these details and is content to know that the account is growing steadily. This will be the first step, Brian muttered to himself as he began to execute a series of complex money transfer operations. He didn't take out all of his money. That would have been too obvious and probably illegal. But he reconfigured his portfolio, moving some of it to investments that are less liquid but have higher long-term returns. If Olivia decides to act immediately upon receiving the promotion, she will not have immediate access to this funding. Next, he opened a new folder containing all the evidence Morgan had collected: photos, text message logs, hotel receipts. They will be part of his leverage. But Brian knew that wasn't enough. Evidence of betrayal may give him momentary satisfaction, but it won't really change anything. Olivia could still get half the assets and start a new life with Lucas. He needs more. Brian picked up his cell phone and dialed another number. "Adrian," he said when the call was connected, "I need some information about the executive team at Oak Ridge Technologies." Adrian is an attorney Brian met in the construction industry and specializes in corporate legal matters. They have worked together on several projects before and have built a good relationship. "What type of information?" Adrian asked cautiously. "Company policies, particularly rules regarding office romances and restrictions on relationships between executives and subordinates." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. "Brian, this sounds like a sensitive issue. Are you sure you want to go this way?" "I had no choice, Adrian. Consider it a favor to an old friend." Another silence, then a sigh. "Well, I'll see what I can find. But Brian, whatever happens, think calmly. Revenge rarely brings the fulfillment you expect." Brian hung up the phone, and his eyes fell on the wedding photo on the dining room table. He and Olivia looked so happy and in love in the photos. They had just made a lifelong commitment and were full of anticipation for the future. "The love that was once there is dead," Brian said softly, placing the photo face down on the table. "And now there is only revenge." Tuesday morning, Brian's cell phone rang. "It's Morgan. I have some new information." Morgan's voice sounded a little nervous. "About Lucas." "What message?" "He's not just dating Olivia. I found out he was also having an affair with another woman in the company, the head of human resources, Catherine Green." Brian felt a wave of vertigo. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely sure. I have photos and text message logs. Looks like this guy likes to have his feet in two boats at once." The corner of Brian's mouth lifted into a sneer. "This could be useful. Send me all the information." After hanging up the phone, Brian began to reevaluate his plan. Not only was Lucas using his position to develop relationships with subordinates, he was cheating on two women at the same time. If this information were to become public, it would not only affect Lucas' career, it would completely shatter Olivia's illusions about the relationship. But Brian is in no hurry to act. He needs to wait for the perfect time, when Olivia gets the promotion she's been dreaming of, when she thinks everything is going according to plan, when she's ready to leave him and take half of her savings. Over the next few days, Brian continues to gather information and refine his plan while playing the role of the clueless husband. Every smile, every hug, every "I love you" became a carefully choreographed performance. Olivia, on the other hand, is so immersed in her own plans and secrets that she doesn't even realize the storm is coming. On Friday afternoon, while Brian was in his office wrapping up a construction project, he received a call from Olivia. "Brian." Her voice was full of excitement. "I got a promotion. Director of Marketing." "That's great, honey." Brian forced himself to act surprised and delighted. "I knew you could do it. We should celebrate." "Sure. The company's having a little celebration tonight, and then we can have a good weekend. Maybe a weekend in Cape Cod, just like we used to do." "Sounds perfect," Brian replied, his mind already counting down. "I'm so proud of you, Olivia. You deserve it." After hanging up, Brian took a deep breath, then dialed Adrian's number. "It's time," he said briefly. Olivia's company celebration is held at a trendy bar, and Brian politely declines the invitation to attend, claiming that an important project meeting can't be postponed. In fact, he was finalizing the details of their plan with Adrian. "All the paperwork was ready," Adrian said, as they sat in a conference room in Adrian's office. "And the Oak Ridge Technologies employee handbook explicitly prohibited relationships between executives and subordinates, especially on direct reporting lines. Violation of this policy may result in disciplinary action or even termination." Brian nodded, flipping through the papers in front of him. "So what if there is evidence that Lucas had an inappropriate relationship with both Olivia and Catherine?" Considering his position and influence, this would be a serious violation of company policy, especially when two employees are involved, one of whom is also the head of HR. "Perfect," Brian whispered. And on the other hand, Adrian pushed over another stack of papers. I have consulted with several family law experts regarding marital assets. In Massachusetts, if one spouse has been unfaithful in the marriage, this may affect the property division decision, although not absolutely. More importantly, we have documented Olivia's plan to conceal her intent to transfer assets, which could be considered fraudulent in court. Brian went through the paperwork to make sure he understood every detail. So it's unlikely that she'll get as much as she expects, even if it does end up going the way of divorce. If handled properly, yes. Judges don't usually uphold premeditated deception. Brian closed the file and leaned back in his chair. So what's next? Adrian's expression turned serious. Brian, as your friend, I have to ask once. Are you sure you want to do this? It will completely destroy your marriage and probably do damage to both of your reputations. Brian's eyes became determined. Olivia has destroyed our marriage, Adrian. She betrayed me, lied to me, and planned to take away everything we had earned together. I'm just making sure she pays for her choices. Adrian sighed and nodded. The next step, then, is to present this evidence to Oak Ridge's executives and HR department at the right time, while preparing for possible legal proceedings. I'd wait until Olivia officially takes over her new position, Brian said, to give her a taste of success before letting it all fall apart. By the time Brian left Adrian's office, night had fallen. He drove home with both the anticipation of revenge and the pain of loss. Regardless of the outcome of this revenge scheme, that innocent love and trust between him and Olivia is gone forever. The weekend trip to Cape Cod went as planned. Brian and Olivia stayed at an oceanfront hotel and celebrated Olivia's success with walks in the sunshine and seafood dinners. To outsiders, they appear to be a happy couple sharing the joyous moments of life. But underneath the surface, the two have their own agendas. Olivia is planning her new life, and Brian is waiting to exact his revenge. On Sunday night, as they sat on the hotel balcony enjoying a bottle of champagne, Olivia suddenly became serious. Brian, she spoke, her voice shaking a little, we need to talk. Brian's heart raced, but he kept a calm expression. Sure, honey. What's going on? Olivia took a deep breath and seemed to be gathering her courage. I've been thinking, maybe we should consider taking some time apart. Separate. Brian feigned surprise. Why? What happened? Nothing in particular. Olivia avoided his gaze. We seem to have gotten farther and farther apart. We have different goals, different aspirations. I think I need some space to think about what I want. Brian watched her, watching the hesitation and guilt in her eyes. In that moment, he almost wanted to expose her lies and tell her he already knew everything. But he controlled his impulses. Is this about your promotion? He asked softly. Do you think the new position will affect our relationship? Partly, I guess. Olivia grabbed the step. The new position will have more responsibilities and may require more travel. I don't want you to feel neglected. So your solution is to leave me altogether? There was a hint of deliberate hurt in Brian's voice. Olivia looks disturbed. It's not permanent, just for a while. Gives us all a chance to think about what we want. Brian was silent for a moment, pretending to digest the information. Have you already found a place? Olivia looked a little surprised. Yes, there is an apartment close to the office. I want to move there next month. Is this really what you want, Olivia? She avoided his gaze. I think it's best for both of us. Brian nodded slowly, as if accepting the decision. If that's what you want, I won't stop you. But I want you to be honest about one thing. What is it? Anyone else? Olivia's face turned pale for an instant, but she quickly regained her composure. What? No, of course not. It's just about us, about the space I need. Another lie. Brian could almost praise her acting. Well, he said finally, if you need time and space, I'll give it to you. But we need to talk about some practical issues, finances, the house, etc. Of course, Olivia replied quickly, seemingly relieved. We can take our time with these issues. I don't want any unnecessary arguments. I don't want to, Brian said, a bitter smile on his face. We can handle this civilized. When they returned home to Boston, a strange calm enveloped them. Ostensibly, they come to an understanding that Olivia will move out next month and that they will separate for a while they work out the practicalities. And underneath the surface, everyone has their own agenda. Olivia is looking forward to starting her new life, while Brian is waiting for that perfect time to let it all fall apart. On Monday morning, Olivia went to work with palpable excitement to start her first day as marketing director. Brian went to the office as well, but his mind was completely off his work. At noon, he got a call from Morgan. "Everything's ready," Morgan said briefly. "Just give the nod, and we're ready to go." "She should be enjoying her new office by now," Brian replied. "Wait a couple more days and let her fully enjoy her success. Then we move." Over the next 2 days, Brian continued his role as a supportive husband, listening to Olivia each night as she talked about her new position, team, and responsibilities. She doesn't say a word about her impending separation, but Brian notices that she's beginning to organize her belongings and quietly prepare for her departure. On Wednesday night, when Olivia announced that she needed to attend a team-building dinner, Brian knew the time was right. He was sure she was going to see Lucas, probably to celebrate her promotion and impending freedom. "Have fun," he said calmly. "Don't worry about me. I'll order takeout." Brian dialed Morgan's number immediately after Olivia left. "It's time," he said, "to execute the plan." An hour later, Brian received confirmation from Morgan that an email detailing Lucas's inappropriate relationship with Olivia and Catherine had been sent to the CEO, board members, and Human Resources Department of Oak Ridge Technologies. The emails were accompanied by evidence such as photographs, text message logs, and hotel receipts, which clearly showed that Lucas used his position to develop relationships with two subordinates, one of whom had just been promoted to the head of the department to which he reported directly. "Now, we wait," Brian said to himself, pouring a glass of whiskey and sitting in an armchair in the living room. A few hours later, Olivia burst through the door, her face pale and her eyes red. She looks totally devastated. "What happened?" Brian asked, feigning concern, even though he already knew the answer. "It's a nightmare," Olivia choked out. "Someone sent emails to company executives about Lucas, about him and the women in the company, including me." "What?" Brian acted shocked. "You're related to Lucas?" Olivia fell onto the couch and tears came to her eyes. "I'm sorry, Brian. I don't know how to tell you." "Wait, let me get this straight." Brian's voice turned icy. "You've been dating your boss, and now the company finds out." "It's not just me," Olivia said, wiping tears from her eyes. "He's also with Catherine, the head of human resources. Also relevant. Neither one of us knew the other existed." "So you were deceived by him?" There was a hint of sarcasm in Brian's tone, but Olivia was too caught up in her own pain to notice. "It's all over, Brian. My promotion, my career. The company has launched an investigation, and I could be fired. Lucas has been suspended." Brian watched her silently, with a mixture of vengeful satisfaction and a hint of pity for the woman he had once loved. But that hint of compassion was quickly drowned out by the memory of betrayal. So, he finally spoke, his voice awfully calm. "What are you going to do? Still want to move out?" Olivia looked up with surprise and confusion in her eyes. You know, something about you planning to move out next month, take half your account, and start a new life?" "Yes, Olivia, I know. I overheard your conversation with Amelia when I was installing the flooring under the sink cabinet." Olivia's face turned even paler. "Brian, I can explain." "No need," Brian interrupted. "I've heard enough. You betrayed me, lied to me, and planned to take away everything we had earned together. Now that your plan has failed, you come back for sympathy." "It wasn't like that," Olivia cried. "I was confused and made bad decisions. But I realize my mistake now. We can fix this and start over." Brian sneered. "Fix? Starting over? After you planned to betray me by having sex with another man, and we're going to take half of our savings? I don't think so, Olivia." "Please, Brian." Olivia pleaded desperately. "I don't know what I was thinking. I love you, and we can get through this together." "Love?" Brian shook his head. "Your love died the moment you decided to betray me. In fact, I'm not sure it ever really existed." He stood up and walked toward the stairs. "By the way, you're probably wondering who blew the whistle on Lucas to the company." Olivia looked up with a twinkle of doubt in her eyes. "It was me," Brian said calmly. "I hired a private investigator to follow you, collected all the evidence, and then sent it to the company executives at the right time. Your promotion, your career, your new life, I destroyed them, just as you intended to destroy our marriage." Olivia looks thunderstruck and completely speechless. "As for our account," Brian continued, "I've rearranged most of the investments. Even if we do end up divorced, you won't get as much as you expected. I have consulted with an attorney, and your infidelity in the marriage and intent to plan a deceptive transfer of assets will heavily influence the property division decision. You? You can't do that. Olivia finally found her voice. That's our shared money. Yes, it's us together. Brian's voice sharpened. Not just your ATM. You think you can simply take half and walk away and start a new life? That's not how life works, Olivia. Actions have consequences, and betrayal has a price. He turned and walked up the stairs, leaving Olivia sitting alone in the living room, overwhelmed by the consequences of her own choices. I'll be moving out for a few days tomorrow, he said, stopping at the top of the stairs. And when I come back, I want you to be gone. As for the divorce, my attorney will contact you. The next few days were a nightmare for Olivia. Not only did she lose her newly promoted position, but she also faced a company investigation and possible termination. Her affair is revealed to be a deception, her marriage breaks up, and her financial security is jeopardized. And Brian, he moved into Morgan's apartment temporarily. While revenge brings a certain amount of satisfaction, the wounds inside are not fully healed. 12 years of marriage ended like this, leaving behind only bitterness and regret. Saturday morning, Brian got a call from Amelia. You know, she said as soon as she opened her mouth, her voice filled with anger. You destroyed her life. She destroyed mine first, Brian replied calmly. I'm just making sure she pays for her choices. She made mistakes, Brian. Amelia's voice softened a bit, but she's really sorry now. She cries all the time and can barely eat or sleep. That's her own problem now, Brian replied. And though a flicker of guilt flashed through him, it was then suppressed. She made her choice, and now she has to face the consequences. She wants to talk to you, Amelia insisted. At least give her a chance to explain. Explain what? I heard everything. She plans to leave me when she gets her promotion, take half the account, and start a new life. What else is there to explain? There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment. People say things they don't mean when they're angry or confused, Brian. I'm not justifying her behavior, but she's really hurting right now. Brian took a deep breath and tried to control his emotions. Amelia, I understand that you are her sister and you want to help her. But this is between me and Olivia. She betrayed my trust and lied to me. Now she must face the consequences of her actions. After hanging up the phone, Brian sat at the window and looked out at the cityscape. He should feel triumphant and satisfied he has succeeded in getting back at the wife who betrayed him. But why is his heart still so empty? Because vengeance doesn't heal hurt, he whispered to himself. It only creates more hurt. But it's come this far, and there's no turning back. Olivia's betrayal and deceit destroyed the trust and love between them, and Brian's revenge ensures that the damage is permanent. Whatever they once had is now gone forever. When Brian returned home on Sunday night, Olivia had moved out. Many of the personal belongings in the house have disappeared, leaving a strange sense of emptiness. On the dining room table, he found a letter. After a moment's hesitation, Brian opened the envelope and began to read Olivia's handwritten letter. Dear Brian, by the time you read this, I will have left our home. I don't know where to begin to express my remorse and shame. I betrayed your trust and hurt you, and for that I will never forgive myself. I know apologizing won't make up for my mistakes. My behavior is indefensible. I was blinded by my own desires and insecurities and made the biggest mistake of my life. You have a right to be angry, a right to hate me. Your vengeance is well-deserved. I lost everything: my job, my reputation, and most of all, I lost you. I don't expect your forgiveness, nor do I expect us to be able to repair a broken relationship. I just want you to know that despite my behavior suggesting otherwise, I did love you. My betrayal was not because of anything you did wrong, but because of a flaw in my heart. I have contacted an attorney to start working on the divorce papers. I will not make unreasonable demands on any property. I know I've lost that right. However you choose to move on with your life, I hope you find peace and happiness. You deserve loyalty and true love, which I have failed to give you. I'm so sorry, Olivia. Brian put the letter down and felt a wave of mixed emotions flood through him: pain, anger, sadness, and even a hint of relief. This home that was once filled with love and hope is now nothing but memories and regrets. He walked over to the window and looked out at the night sky. 12 years of marriage ended, leaving a trail of debris. Revenge gave him momentary satisfaction, but it also left a permanent wound. In that moment, Brian realized that the real challenge is not how to get back at those who hurt you, but how to get up from betrayal and heartbreak and rebuild your life. The future remains unknown and full of uncertainty. But one thing's for sure, Brian will never be the same man of blind trust again. He has paid a heavy price to learn that lesson. The price of betrayal, he whispered to himself. We all paid it. 3 months later, fall had arrived in Boston. The leaves were beginning to turn red and yellow, and there was a hint of coolness in the air. Brian stood on the balcony of his apartment, looking out over the Charles River, a cup of coffee in his hand. Since he and Olivia split up, he's moved to this new apartment in Beacon Hill in an attempt to start a new life. Divorce proceedings have begun, but are moving slowly. Olivia, as she had promised in her letter, did not make excessive property claims, which made the whole process go smoother than Brian had expected. But the legal process is only a small part of getting back on track. Inner healing is another matter. Brian's cell phone rings, and Morgan's name is displayed on the screen. What's new? Brian asked as he picked up the phone. Yes, Morgan replied. Olivia got a new job at a small market research firm. The pay is much lower than what she had at Oak Ridge. It seems she's been blacklisted in some way within the industry. Brian didn't feel the satisfaction he expected. Where does she live now? She moved to a small apartment on the other side of town. Amelia comes over to see her occasionally. Other than that, she seems to lead a rather lonely life. After the call, Brian stood on the balcony, contemplating everything that had happened over the past few months. His revenge plan worked. Olivia lost her job, her romance, and her financial security. But why is this sense of success so hollow? The laptop on the desk beeped with a new email. Brian walks over to find an update from his lawyer. The judge has set a date for the final divorce hearing, which is next month. Soon, the legal bond between him and Olivia will be officially dissolved, and their 12-year marriage will be a thing of the past. Brian closed his laptop and decided to go for a walk. Walking through the familiar streets of Boston, he couldn't help but think back on how much had changed in the past few months. The Oak Ridge technology scandal is making waves in business circles. Lucas was summarily dismissed and indicted for violating company policy and abuse of authority. Catherine, the HR director who was also duped by Lucas, resigned to avoid further investigation. Olivia, on the other hand, not only lost her recent promotion, but was also fired for inappropriate behavior. Brian's professional life, on the other hand, hasn't been affected much. He continues to work for construction companies and was even recently offered a leadership position on a major project. Work gave him a sense of purpose, a sense of stability in the midst of the chaos of his personal life. But in the dead of night, when the distracting effects of work wear off, that emptiness returns. He took revenge on his wife for betraying him, but it didn't bring the peace or fulfillment he had hoped for. Instead, it seemed to leave a hole in his soul, a void that could not be filled. Walking to the Charles River Esplanade, Brian sat down on a bench and watched the river flow slowly by. Several couples walked by hand in hand, their laughter and intimacy sending a tingle through Brian. He'd had that kind of happiness once, or at least he'd thought it was happiness. His cell phone rang again, this time an unfamiliar number. After a moment's hesitation, Brian picked up the phone. Hello, Brian. A familiar female voice came through. It's me, Olivia. Brian's heart raced. He didn't expect to hear her voice. Olivia, he said calmly, what can I do for you? I got a notice from my attorney about the final hearing date. Her voice sounded tired. And I just wanted to make sure you got it too. Yes, I received it. There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment. Brian, Olivia finally said, I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I'm really sorry. I regret what I did every day. Brian closed his eyes and tried to control his emotions. Olivia, I don't see the point in discussing this right now. We've come this far, and turning back is no longer possible. I know. Her voice took on a distinctly choked tone. I want you to know that I am truly sorry for the hurt I caused. Anyway, I wish you luck, Brian. After hanging up, Brian continued to sit on the bench, watching the sky darken. Was Olivia's apology sincere? Does she truly regret her behavior? The questions lingered in his mind, but he wasn't sure the answers still mattered. A week later, Brian accidentally meets Catherine, the former HR executive who was also cheated by Lucas at a cafe. She looked very different from the last time Brian had seen her at Olivia's company party. Then she had been confident and radiant. Now she looked tired and wary. "Brian," she said with surprise in her voice when she recognized him. "It's been a long time." "Catherine," Brian responded with a nod. "Are you okay?" It was a simple greeting, but it seemed heavy in the context of their shared experience. "I, I'm adapting," she replied, "getting a new job and starting to rebuild my life." "What about you?" "Pretty much the same thing," Brian said, a strange sense of empathy forming between the two men. "Want to grab a cup of coffee together?" Sitting in the corner of a cafe, two people who have been cheated on by the same person begin to talk, sharing their experiences and feelings. Catherine recounts how she was drawn to Lucas' charm and commitment, how she believed his lies, and how shocked and humiliated she was when it all came out. "What's ironic," she said, tapping her fingers on her coffee cup, "is that as head of human resources, I should have been more vigilant about this type of behavior. But love makes you blind, doesn't it?" Brian nodded slightly, remembering his blind trust in Olivia. "We all want to believe in the people we love." "So, you were the one who outed Lucas to the company?" Catherine asked directly, curiosity in her eyes. Brian didn't answer directly. "How do you know?" "A few details," Catherine said softly. "The timing of the email, the type of evidence. When I calmed down and thought about it, I realized it couldn't be a coincidence. Someone knew about the relationship between the three of us and chose the most devastating way to expose it." Brian was silent for a moment, then nodded matter-of-factly. "Yes, it's me. I heard that Olivia plans to leave me when she gets her promotion, taking half of our savings with her. I hired a private investigator and found out about her relationship with Lucas and, as well as the fact that he was dating me at the same time." Catherine finished the sentence for him. "I see. Your motive is revenge." "Initially, yes," Brian admitted, "but now I'm not sure that's worth it." Catherine watched him with both understanding and judgment in her eyes. "Revenge always looks sweeter than it actually is. I don't blame you, Brian. I'd probably do the same thing. But I hope you find peace beyond the anger and betrayal." The conversation left a lasting impression on Brian. As he left the cafe, he felt a strange relief, as if telling the truth had relieved him of some burden he had been carrying. As the date of the final divorce hearing approaches, Brian begins to organize the belongings and documents of his and Olivia's life together. Photographs from their wedding ceremony, memorabilia from vacations, artwork purchased together. Each item carries memories that are both sweet and painful. He was sorting through his papers and found an old envelope containing letters they had written to each other when they were first married. It was a ritual suggested by their wedding planner, writing down promises and expectations for each other and then rereading them on each anniversary. Brian hesitated for a moment, then opened the envelope and took out Olivia's letter. "Dear Brian, by the time you read this, we'll be married. The idea both excites and terrifies me. I never thought I would meet someone like you, so kind, patient, and caring. You made me believe that true love exists. I promise to always be loyal to you, to support your dreams, and to be there for you in difficult times. I promise to strive to be the companion you need, to listen to your concerns and share your joys. I promise to grow with you and go through the ups and downs of life together. No one knows what the future will bring, but I do know that with you by my side, we can overcome anything. No matter what happens, remember that my heart will always belong to you. Love always, Olivia." Brian put the letter down and felt a tingle. These words, once filled with hope and love, now seem so hollow and false. Or maybe they were sincere at the time, and it's just that people and feelings have changed over time. He reaches for the letter he wrote to Olivia, but ultimately decides not to read it. Some memories are best left in the past. The day before the divorce hearing, Brian received a phone call from Adrian. "Everything's ready for tomorrow," Adrian said. "The judge has reviewed all the documents, and given the circumstances, I think the verdict will be in your favor." "Thank you, Adrian," Brian replied. There was no triumph in his voice, only a calm acceptance. "After this is over, I thought we could have a drink together." "Of course," Adrian paused. "By the way, I heard that Olivia was recently diagnosed with major depression. Her sister Amelia told me about it. I hope it makes a difference in the division of property. But given her infidelity and previous plans, I don't think it will change anything." Brian felt a pang of guilt hit him. Even though Olivia's betrayal hurt him, he never wanted her life to fall apart completely. Is she in therapy? As far as I know, yes. Amelia says she's seeing a psychiatrist and taking medication. After hanging up, Brian went to the window and looked out at the city. His revenge is complete and Olivia pays for her betrayal. But why does he still feel so empty? Because revenge doesn't heal wounds, he said to himself. Only forgiveness can do that. But is he ready to forgive Olivia? Ready to let go of that pain and anger of betrayal? He's not sure. Maybe forgiveness is not for the other person, but for yourself, to release that bitterness and resentment that poisons your soul. On the day of the divorce hearing, the air outside the courtroom was tense and oppressive. Brian, dressed in a dark suit, was standing in the hallway waiting when he saw Olivia and Amelia walking together. Olivia looked much more haggard than he remembered, with noticeable dark circles under her eyes, and her once shining blonde hair now looked dull. When she saw Brian, she stopped in her tracks, seemingly debating whether or not she should go up and say hello. Eventually, it was Amelia who gave her a gentle nudge, and she slowly made her way to Brian. "Hello, Brian," she whispered, her voice almost a whisper. "Olivia," Brian responded with a nod, trying to keep his expression calm. "Are you okay?" It's a stupid question. Obviously she's not good. But social etiquette demanded that he ask. I'm working on it," she replied, sadness and exhaustion glinting in her eyes. "I heard you were offered leadership of the new program. Congratulations." "Thanks," Brian said, unsure how to continue this conversation. "I heard you got a new job." Olivia nodded. "Yes, a small company. The work is great and the co-workers are friendly." The conversation between the two was stiff and awkward, full of unspoken words and unhealed wounds. Eventually, Amelia breaks the awkwardness. "Court is about to start," she reminded. "We should go in." In court, everything went as expected. The judge reviewed all of the documents and considered Olivia's infidelity and prior plans, as well as Brian's property reorganization actions. The final verdict was in Brian's favor, but it didn't completely crush Olivia. She still received a portion of the joint estate, albeit far less than half of what it normally would have been. Brian felt a strange sense of relief when the judge declared their marriage officially dissolved. 12 years of shared life came to an end. The satisfaction of revenge is stronger than he expected. He succeeds in making sure Olivia pays for her betrayal. Walking out of the courtroom, Brian noticed Olivia sobbing quietly in the corner as Amelia comforted her. He walks by indifferently, but Olivia calls out to him. "Brian, please," she choked out. "Can you give me a minute?" Brian stopped and turned around with an expressionless face. "What's up?" "I just wanted to tell you that I'm really sorry," Olivia said as she wiped tears from her eyes. "I know it doesn't make up for what I've done, but I want you to know how sorry I am." "Why did you betray me?" Brian asked, his voice icy. "We're not happy." Olivia bowed her head. "I don't know, Brian. Maybe it's because I'm selfish, or maybe it's because Lucas makes me feel special. But none of that matters. I screwed up everything." Brian sneered. "Yes, you did screw up. Not only did you lose your job and your reputation, you lost the only person who ever really loved you. Can you forgive me, Brian? Give me a second chance." Olivia's eyes twinkled with hope. Brian gazed at her, his eyes firm. "No, Olivia. Some betrayals are unforgivable. Trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. You made a choice, and now you have to live with the consequences." He turned to leave, his pace firm. The satisfaction from this revenge was far more intense than he could have imagined. Justice is served, and he can finally say goodbye to a relationship full of lies and start a whole new life. In the months following his divorce, Brian focused on rebuilding his life. He made significant progress at work, started new hobbies, and even tried dating, meeting several interesting women. Though Olivia's betrayal makes him more cautious, he finds himself slowly coming out of the shadows and embracing life again. One night, while he was organizing papers at his apartment, he received a message from Morgan, accompanied by a photograph. "You might want to check this out," Morgan wrote. The photos show Olivia sitting alone in a cheap cafe, looking haggard and visibly older than before. "Why are you sending me this?" Brian replies. "I saw her by chance," Morgan replied. "She's now working as an assistant at a small company for a third of what she used to make. I've heard she's been blacklisted from the industry in some way and can't get any decent work. Brian looked at the photo and felt a wave of satisfaction flood over him. Olivia pays the price for her betrayal. She loses her career, her status, her financial security, and even her self-respect. Revenge tasted sweeter than he could have imagined. Thanks for the info, Brian replied. But I think we should end this surveillance. The past is over and I've moved on. Morgan expressed understanding and congratulated Brian on his success in making the woman who betrayed him pay the price she deserved. A year later in the spring, Brian accidentally meets Olivia while walking along the Charles River. She looked even more haggard than in the photo, with a look of exhaustion and loss in her eyes. "Brian," she said in surprise, with obvious tension in her voice. "It's been a long time." "Olivia," Brian responded with a cold nod. You look great," she forced a smile. "I heard you got promoted to VP." "Yes," Brian replied briefly, showing no interest in continuing this conversation. Olivia hesitated, as if gathering her courage. "Brian, I've been meaning to tell you that I really regret what happened. That was the biggest mistake of my life. You think it is possible that we become friends at least?" Brian looked at her coldly. "No, Olivia, that's impossible. Some things, once done, cannot be undone. You betrayed my trust, and that kind of thing can't be rebuilt." "I understand," Olivia whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. I'm really sorry." "Your apologies mean nothing to me," Brian said calmly but firmly. "I've moved on, and so should you." As they went their separate ways, Brian felt a strange calm. Revenge didn't heal his wounds, but time, self-reflection, and this limited reconciliation began to do the trick. He knows he may never fully forgive Olivia for her betrayal, but he's also beginning to understand that continued anger and resentment will only poison himself. Brian leaves Olivia and continues his walk without looking back. He feels a deep sense of satisfaction. Not only has he succeeded in making Olivia pay for her betrayal, but he stepped out of her shadow completely, rejecting her attempts to rebuild any relationship. Later that night, after returning to his apartment, Brian sat on his balcony, taking in the cityscape of Boston. His cell phone rings with a message from Catherine inviting him to a small party this weekend. They've met a few times since their chance encounter at the cafe and realized that they have a lot in common with each other, far more than just being cheated on by the same person. Brian smiled and replied to Catherine's invitation. He has a thriving career, an apartment in the best part of town, and a social circle of genuine and interesting friends. As for Olivia, she's lost everything: job, status, reputation, financial security, even self-respect. "The price of betrayal," Brian said to himself, sipping a glass of fine whiskey. She paid her fair share. Outside the window, the city lights twinkled as if celebrating his victory. Brian felt a sense of fulfillment and peace that he had never felt before. His plan for revenge is executed perfectly. Olivia gets the punishment she deserves, and he gets a new lease on life. Soon after, he begins dating Catherine and finds her to be someone who truly understands the value of loyalty and honesty. His career continued to climb, and he soon became a senior executive in the company. And whenever he occasionally hears about Olivia, who continues to struggle in her low-paying job, never able to regain the status she once held, he feels a sense of quiet satisfaction. For Brian, the story has the perfect ending. The betrayers are punished and the loyalists triumph. Life moves on, but one thing never changes: some betrayals are unforgivable, and those who choose to betray will eventually pay the price. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.